We're good to go. Like I said, if you want to do a quick, everybody thinks for now.
Yeah,
I don't say anything. Just let me know.
No, I'm fine. All right. It's all going to be. All right.
Bring Jack up, and then we'll go right into the
First Jack 30.
Yep. So we're all good.
So it should be good.
Hey, Jack.
How you doing?
You want to start now?
You can.
If you want.
Okay.
They're bringing up a patch cable for me, but I can do that while you're working.
Okay.
How are you? Hi, Anita, Thompkins. Nice to meet you. How's your name?
My name's Ryan.
Okay.
Yeah, do whatever you got to do.
Good morning, everybody. Good morning. I'd like to go ahead and start our data management conference. For those that don't know me, my name is Alan Roberson. I'm the executive director at ASDWA. I've been there for 2.5 years. This will be my third data management conference. But I appreciate everybody coming here, taking the time from their busy schedules, and trying to spend 2.5 days here working on a lot of the multitude of issues that we have with SDWIS State and SDWIS Prime. So I was talking to Michael a little bit about how to sort of lighten everything up a little bit, and we're both baseball fans and follow the Nationals pretty closely. And I started off, well, maybe I'm the relief pitcher, but clearly not. So I'm kind of like the Oakland A's have this guy that comes in for one inning, the opening. So that's me. I'm just going to tee it up here and then turn it over to Jack Capp from Georgia DNR to give us a welcome from the host state. So, Jack.
Thanks, Alan. So it's my pleasure to get to welcome you guys to Atlanta. And you know, one of the traditions that the Braves have, going with the baseball theme, is they'll play some theme music for each of the players that come up to bat. So I kind of missed out on that. I could have given you my theme music to come up to the plate here, oh, there it goes. Okay, great. Again, welcome to Atlanta. Georgia's a fun place to be, and so I've been with Georgia EPD for about 27 years now, and Georgia has grown immensely during that period of time, and so now we're at about 10.6 million people that we're providing drinking water to. That makes us the 8th most populated state in the country. And we're still growing fast. So the latest data shows that we're in addition to being currently the 8th largest state, we're the 10th fastest growing state. As soon as we get some pictures, the picture there that's on the right side of the screen is an artist rendition of the Atlanta Bellwood Quarry. After it gets completed, and that old quarry is turned into a drinking water reservoir for the city of Atlanta. So the city of Atlanta currently gets their drinking water from the Chattahoochee River. It is a managed flow river downstream from Lake Lanier. So, I mean, there's a reliable flow of water even in drought. But the Bellwood Quarry will give the city an additional 30 days of storage that it's never had before. And in addition to that, it will be the largest city park when it's completed. So that's pretty exciting, and that's under construction as we speak. You guys picked a great location for your meeting. For those of us who live here, we don't get to do the touristy stuff that much because my wife gets to take the kids when it's time for that kind of year. I'm at work and she's taking the kids to the fun places. But right here, just across the street, you've got these really great places if you have a few minutes to visit. The Georgia Aquarium is the largest aquarium in the Western Hemisphere. So thanks to the Home Depot founders for that gift to Atlanta. The only place outside of Asia where you can see a whale shark. So that's pretty cool. We've got the World of Coca-Cola that's right next door, where you can taste any kind of weird Coca-Cola flavor from anywhere in the world. I don't know, maybe they still have the new Coke from the 1980s. If you're about my age, you remember that. And then the CNN Center is also across the street. So, the most well-known news franchise in the world was started here in Atlanta. And there's a place there for tours, and you can see the action that's going on. In addition to that, there's a very large food court in the building if you're looking for something quick to eat. And then finally, Centennial Olympic Park, which is right across the street, and a really great downtown park for the city. That park was created out of old buildings and parking lots in time for the 1996 Olympics. And to this day, it's a great tourist location, and they have summer concerts. And so it looks like they've got a whole bunch of activity going on there as I was driving up this morning. So again, welcome to Atlanta. I'm going to give you just a few highlights about the drinking water in the state of Georgia, and then I will turn it over. One of the interesting things about being in Georgia is we've got some really great water resources. And so we've got a map here of the river basins. The way Georgia is situated geographically, we don't have any large rivers that come into the state. Right, so the headwaters of all of our rivers are actually in Georgia. And in the northern part of the state, where is more mountainous, and as we move south, we get more of a coastal plain. So most of our population is up in the north, which means the rivers that we have that we rely upon for drinking water are not that big. And so that creates some interesting challenges for us as a state. But in addition to surface water, we've got some really great groundwater resources as well. And so we've got groundwater usage across the state. The coastal plain down in the south, the aquifers are much more productive. And so we have a lot more for usage of groundwater down in the southern part of the state. But we do have groundwater usage across the state for drinking water and other uses. Georgia is blessed with abundant rainfall in a typical year. And so fortunately, the last couple of years have been typical years. One of the things about averages, right, is you don't get the average in every year. But in an average year, most of the state's getting about 50 inches of rain a year. So that's a pretty good amount. If you'll notice the greenish blue areas in the very top right, we're getting upwards of 70 to approaching 80 inches of rain in the North Georgia mountains, which is really great because that's the headwaters for Lake Lanier and the Chattahoochee River, which provides most of the drinking water for Atlanta and the surrounding communities. So in a typical year, we're in really good shape from a drinking water standpoint. However, every year is not a typical year. And so because the rivers are not really big, Georgia is a little bit susceptible to drought. And so the maps here are a couple of snapshots from the United States Drought Monitor, one from 2007 and another one from 2011, just sort of highlighting how severe droughts can happen in Georgia, and they can happen anywhere. So, again, in the figure on the left from 2007, is intensely drought in the northern part of the state where most of our population is, where Atlanta is. But then 2011 down in southwest Georgia is where most of our agricultural operations are for the state. And so we can have drought in any part of the state if we don't get the rain that we typically enjoy. As I mentioned, we've got groundwater and surface water resources that we use abundantly in our state. The dots here on the map reflect municipal and industrial water withdrawals, so not necessarily all drinking water. Of course, smaller drinking water systems that use less than 100,000 gallons per day don't have to have a water withdrawal permit, but this is a map showing our water withdrawal permits. You'll notice the blue line, which is in Georgia, we refer to that as the fall line. It's kind of the break point between the Piedmont and the mountainous areas in the north, and then the coastal plain in the south, where we've got more agriculture and more groundwater usage. So you can see how the dots shift from relying more upon surface water in the black to more of the groundwater in the red. So with the hills and the mountains being more in North Georgia, our drinking water reservoirs are located in the northern part of the state. And then when we get to the southern part of the state, which isn't shown on the map, there aren't any. So we're relying upon those drinking water reservoirs in the northern part of the state. And so when you take that figure that I showed you before and add a little bit more detail to it, you'll see the northern part of the state, we've got about 8 million people that we're providing drinking water to. Not a whole lot of agriculture going on in that part of the state. Some surface water that we rely upon, right? And we say some surface water again because these are the headwaters and the beginning of these rivers, so they're not really big yet. And then we do have some groundwater that we can take advantage of. Again, not as productive. The aquifer is not as productive as the south, but we do have groundwater that we rely upon in the northern part of the state. And then when you move to the southern part of the state, about 2 million people, so not nearly as many people, a lot of irrigated acreage. Georgia is a big farm producing state, and we produce some really excellent crops, and those crops rely upon irrigation when it's dry. And so the rivers are a little bit bigger down there in the southern part of the state as they start approaching the Gulf or the ocean. And then, as I mentioned, the Florida aquifer in particular in the southern part of the state, really productive. So in Georgia, about 2,300 permitted public water systems, 150 surface water, which tends to be the larger ones, but then 2,200 groundwater systems. So that's a lot. Public water systems are providing water to about 89% of the state's population. And then, just a quick breakdown, about 1,700 community systems, and then you'll see the transient and the non-transient systems. So again, my pleasure to welcome you here. I hope you have a fantastic conference, and I will turn it back over.
Hey gang, I just want to take 5 minutes to fix the screen really quick before we move on, because we have a lot of important information that we want to cover, and we're a little ahead of schedule, so I like it. Feel free to get up, stretch, do what you got to do, and we'll kick it back in 5 minutes. I don't know. It's not my gear. I'm not pleased that it's not my gear.
Atlanta. And if you don't know me, I'm Anita Thompkins. I'm the Division Director for the Drinking Water Protection Division in the Office of Groundwater and Drinking Water. And I just want to take this time to provide the Office of Groundwater and Drinking Water's perspective on where we are now with Prime, what some next steps, the next steps we're doing, your concerns, and also ended on a note dealing with something that's a lighter note on the compliance monitoring data portal. So yeah, where are we now? Let's talk about the big elephant in the room. Let's just get to it, right? So Prime, where are we now? I think you guys are very familiar with this diagram before, the three components of Prime, the BRE and the UI having that common platform, the data migration element for data to go to bulk upload data, as well as continue to do data transfers, and then the connections with Prime, and that's really to connect to the state-specific functionality. You're very familiar with these three components and how we were moving forward. Over the past 2 years, we have made tremendous progress, and we were excited just like you guys were as well. We were able to, from the UI functionality, we actually were able to develop 12 out of the 14 functions were developed, and also in the process that you guys are exploring in the system. From the BRE perspective, 12 out of the 13 drinking water rules were developed, and you guys were exploring the functionality of those as well. So we were like, yeah, we got our stride. We're making it happen. Yeah, where everybody's doing the happy dance. And then we were working on that third component with the connections with Prime. We were able to have a proof of concept with the virtual exchange services, working with Utah and Virginia to establish that local replication data repository. So we were excited about that part of the system was working. At the last DMUC last year, we had the demos dealing with the prototype services for the microbial samples data upload, and our contractor at that time, Attain, was able to design the framework for the external access of the APIs. So we were hitting our stride. In February, after the shutdown and we all came back, we decided to defer proceeding on any further API work so we could focus on Prime and mostly focus on the BRE and the UI. And then to make sure that we could get across that finish line with having those first states transition in the early of 2020, which was Utah, Connecticut, and Indiana, that were working due diligently with us as well as everybody else to be those first states to pilot that transition. So in my last 2 emails, we hit, some people call it a bump. I call it, we hit the biggest ass speed bump, car flipped over and landed on its head. And that's where we are now. As we began to move, we were getting closer with the BRE, the UI, we had the proof of concept for the virtual exchange services. Then it's like, okay, let's start looking at this data migration element as that last third component of Prime. So we had some high level framing of the data migration, but then when you start, y'all know, when you do the high level stuff and then you got to get in the weeds to see how this is really going to work, well, that's when the issues and the challenges started to happen. So when we noticed that back in May, we're like, okay, we need to get a third-party assessment because our contractor was having issues with to understand how do we get deeper into putting, I call it the meat on the bones, to actually figure out how to do this data migration and to build this data model to integrate all this. So we decided, Office of Water decided to get a third-party assessment, got a micro contract, did all this due diligence and hired a third-party assessment so we could say, okay, without anybody else's, conflicts of interest, because the contractors that we have been using to develop Prime, they'll say one perspective, but we needed someone that wasn't biased, not us, because we're biased because we want it to work, right? And the third-party assessment came back saying that there were significant issues with the data model that was in order to move forward with that. And that data migration, the way it was set up, was not going to happen the way this particular data model was set up. So at that point, the Office of Water, as I always tell people, they always say, well, you're a senior executive, you can make decisions. I go, no, I just make recommendations. There's always a boss, right? So I went to my boss, Jennifer McLean, who's the acting office director, told her what the situation was. Then we went to that next level, and then we actually worked with our deputy administrator, DAA, in the Office of Water to have a conversation with the agency's chief information officer. We took it all the way to the top, telling the agency, we need help. The third-party assessment is showing this. We're working with our contractor. We need your technical expertise to how do we move forward. So that was when you got the first email, something's happening, right? we weren't sure how this was going to proceed, but then once we started digging more into it, it was the recommendation from the Office of Water as well as the CIO, because we realized it was going to take a lot longer than we had anticipated, that the decision was to update, or I would say not update SDWIS state, but do the system technology updates, so that we can be able to have SDWIS state 3.4, so we can focus on the security issues that states have been expressing, as well as reliability. So let me put to the next slide. So that's where we are right now. So with all that said, we're still in consultation with the Chief Information Officer at EPA and also his staff, the Office of Mission Support, because they are the technical experts at EPA that we're working collaboratively with, as well as still working with our contractor to move forward. So right now, for his next steps, we have three. There's a lot of other next steps, but these, I would say, the big three next steps that we're moving forward with is to update the SDWIS state and its underlying technology. And our goal is to have a draft rollout schedule by the end of September. And in order for us to update SDWIS state and its technology, we need to hear from you. We have heard from some states, but we want to take this opportunity here that we're at DMUC to hear from you all. What are some system technology things that can help you so we can get 3.4 version moving forward, really focusing on security issues and its reliability. Renee will be having that discussion in our next session at 10:30. So that's one next step. The next step is to continue right now, since we have a pause in prime development. We want to increase support to the compliance monitoring data portal, and to do improvements for that, and really to transition more states into using that particular application. And our goal is to have at least 15 or more primacy agencies in production by the end of this calendar year. The third next step that we're doing is really continuing to work with the Chief Information Officer, as well as his office, as to understand the data model issues and some corrections that might need to be made, and then understanding from an assessment perspective, where do we go from here? In order to do that, so you see the goal is by the end of the calendar year, and you're like, my God, that's so long. In order to do that, we need to get another contractor on a task order. It's federal government. It takes a while to procure that. So just, what I want to do here is be transparent, honest, telling you what's really happening, because this is where we are. So in order to do that, we got to get a contractor, and that's going to take a second, and a contractor that has the niche to understand data models. That's not as easy as folks think. So we're working in consultation with the Office of Mission Support, with the CIO's office, to find that. Once we get that, we can get a task order, get the contractor, and then go from there. They can do an assessment of the data model. They can actually do an assessment of all the other pieces that have been built to see how do we move forward and what are the next steps. So if you ask the question, what are your next steps with Prime? I would have to tell you, we need to wait until we can understand all these different assessments about the data model and see where we go from there. So it's all unfolding at the same time, that all the questions you have, we have as well, that we're going to be working with the contractor to develop that task order to get more get more clarity of how do we move forward. Good. So with all that said, Michael, just to be clear, Michael Plastino is going to be leading that effort, coordinating and collaborating with the CIO's office, as well as Tina, our project manager for that. And we will keep you posted with better communication. I know that's a concern, with how we're going from there, and to really take your input and hear all your concerns and other things that we need to, as we move and progress forward. So we know some concerns, and I just have a few of them listed on this slide, but we know there are more. So we look forward to hearing those concerns, And I know that some of that will be in the state-only session that Anthony's going to be leading, because sometimes you might not, some of you will be very vocal to us in front, and some of you might not want to be. So we have that opportunity to have the conversation with us, or have more of the conversation in the state-only lunch that's going to be tomorrow. Right now, we know concerns. If SDWIS prime evaluation, where are we going? What are the next steps? We're still waiting to figure that out as well. And the more information we get from our the contractor data model assessments, we'll be able to have more clarity on what are the next steps. We also know that there's been so much time as well as resources invested in prime development. And we can thank you, and we know, we get it, because it's been so much time and resources on our part as well. We are just as devastated as you all. It's the same. No one wants to work on a system and it not work. So we are just as devastated. So we just wanted to share that with you. Also, exchange network grants. Some of you probably are going, what about my exchange network grant? What's going on? What's going on? So Justin Wright has been dealing with exchange network grants. There are some grants that are focusing on CMDP and data cleanup and data quality. Those can still keep moving forward. The ones that are focusing on SDWIS Prime, Justin is working with the lead, the Exchange Network Program Manager, and will be working with those states on a one-on-one basis, communicating with them what needs to happen. So we have that list, and we'll be working through that with you. So just be patient with us as we move forward in that area. And then also the schedule for the rollout of SDWIS State and the technical updates. Once we have Renee Morris has already put in last week Monday, we are going to be working with a particular contractor, and we already requested a level of effort really based on some broad system technology updates that we are very broad, but we'll get more specifics when we hear from you, since we're going to be here for the next 2.5 days. So once we get that, our goal is to have that rollout schedule by the end of September. So then it gives you a tad bit more, I don't want to say certainty, because I'm not sure about this, but it gives you a tad bit more certainty of how we move forward with SDWIS State, the 3.4 version on that. I'm sure there's so many other concerns out there, and we want to hear from you, hear your frustration. We are just as frustrated and also devastated as well. So I'm going to switch gears, because what I want us to do is to talk about the Compliance Monitoring Data Portal on a lighter note. Then we'll have the Data Quality Awards that Michael will be sharing. And then after that, because I want to still recognize all the good work that folks have done dealing with data quality, so to keep that on a lighter note. And then after that, we'll have time to ask tons of questions. And if we know the answer, we will answer it. If we don't, because a lot of things we still don't know yet as far as more what's going to happen with Prime as we move forward. We're just going to be clear with you. We're still trying to evaluate that. We're still trying to get that information. So switching gears to the Compliance Monitoring Data Portal, the system that's in production and is actually working. Right now, from when we were at the last DMUC, we have about 10 states. We have 10 states that are in production, and that's a little bit over 200 plus labs that are, or operators that are flowing data. We think this is a great accomplishment. And as I said earlier, and previously, that we are looking to move that that needle to about 15 or more primacy agencies by the end of this calendar year. In March, we started moving a tad bit more funds or resources to get more contractor support for any new states that are in production. And in April, we added additional resources from EPA to support Derek, who's the project lead on the Compliance Monitoring Data Portal, to do more outreach, and then also to support you states as you transition there. In May, we're resuming some more functionality with CMDP. And now, because of what's happening with Prime, we're able to shift more resources. That means dinero of money to CMDP so we can continue to update it and provide different method analyte pairs for the next release. Right now, I think you might have seen from the email that went out from Anthony or on the ASDWA blog, we are in the process of releasing CMDP Release 2. Right now, it's being tested to make sure things are, the community, certain people in the community are testing it to make sure there's no issues with that. And then it'll be released out to the entire community so we can move forward with that. So if you probably saw the blog also that once we get this Release 2 out, we'll continue to do some other updates in production with CMDP. Right now, it's okay. Don't want to hear myself in that thing. But anyway, right now, in order for us to get Release 2 out for CMDP, we had to make a decision based on some security issues with Prime itself, that Prime is not accessible at this time. So the people that had user IDs to actually go explore the system, because of some security issues on the end with with the system, we had to make the choice. Either we push out CMDP and move forward with CMDP, or we couldn't push out anything. So we made the decision, Office of Water made a decision, let's push out CMDP because that is working, that's in production. We are being able to update and upgrade that technology, as well as include different method analyte pairs. So we wanted to move forward with that. So that's kind of what happened in that area. At 4:30 this afternoon, it'll be my technical experts will be talking with you and giving you really specifics from a technology perspective of what happened with the data model. And that Michael, Renee, and Tina. I mean, I say it in Anita's version because I'm not a techie person. This is my version of how I'd say it. You know, we had the 3 components. We had the BRE UI, we had the data migration, and then we had the APIs for the state-specific functionality. So we were focused on how we developed this. We were focused on the BRE and the UI, focused on that state functionality because that's very important. Then we're like moving to the data migration aspect. Basically, lesson learned, and we're going to still be learning more and more lessons as we do the forensics on what happened and how did we get here with Prime. Yeah, we built these other 2 pieces, and then we're trying to cram them into a data model. It doesn't, now we lesson learned, when you're modernizing a legacy system, you need to build and get into the weeds of what the data model needs to be and its framework. Then you build all the other pieces around it. That's how I can explain it from a non-technical person. But that's basically what happened in a nutshell. They'll be, my folks will be able to give you more details about that. We do plan to do what I call a forensics, going, how the hell did we get here? You know, we're not looking at blame, but we're looking at what lessons can we learn, or that the agency, contractors, or whatever, that we can learn so that we don't run into this issue again, especially as we move forward with Prime or any other data systems that we're trying to modernize. So that's kind of the non-technical version of that. I was able to speak to the ASDWA member board last week, Wednesday, and at that point we had the emails were going to be going out to talk about we're stopping development at this time on Prime because of the data model issues and some other issues, and I was explaining it that way, and I think that helps non-technical people understand what happened and how we can move forward from there. Right. So, of things that we are continue to be committed to you is good communication, and we realize we as Anthony and we all have been trying to figure out what are the best ways to communicate, blogs, how many emails do we send out, is it good, from that perspective. So we want to hear from you on other suggestions on how we can communicate more. Some of you might feel this came out of left field because that email June 28th was the email to say there's a data model issue, we're working to see what's happening, and then there was the next email that came out and said we're stopping Prime development, we're doing like a I don't want to say a U-turn, not a U-turn, but we're doing a 180 to update SDWIS state to version 3.4. And that was really made because we know you use state to run your program. You use SDWIS to run your drinking water programs. So with this delay, and we know that with this issue, with this data model issue, we weren't going to be able to make that March deliverable. So we can't keep holding on. So at that point, we're like, okay, let's stop development on this, figure out what's really needed once we understood the third-party assessment. And now let's help the states manage their programs by updating this 3.4 version of state. So that's how that decision was made. As we move forward, because we're not sure how long it's going to be until we get the contractor in place to do these different assessments and to get information so we can provide clarity of how we move forward. So we still continue to appreciate your positivity. We know this is another disappointment in where we are. We were on a very good glide path. We were making progress. We were all very excited about all the progress that we were making and the exploration that folks were doing in the prime system. So as we move forward, we'll continue to communicate with you, looking forward to having this conversation, to getting your input, your perspective, understanding your frustration, because we are frustrated and devastated as well, and as we move forward. So I want to, from here, have Michael speak on the data quality awards and all the good stuff that folks are doing and continue to do. And then from there, we can actually have more of a conversation and questions and things of that nature. So thank you very much.
Okay, good morning. So for those that don't know me, I'm Michael Plastino. I'm the Chief of the Infrastructure Branch since October 2016. And now with Greg Fabian retiring last year, I'm the longest running member on the EPA team with SDWIS Prime. So I'm trying to figure out still what that says about me. It's a complex question. But one thing for sure, Anita mentioned that we all take this very personally, this project. Anita coming on as the director of the Drinking Water Protection Division 3 years ago, so that was a big reason for me to come back and try to see Prime to completion. It's been, we've had some challenges the last few years. I'm still very hopeful for our future. We've got a fantastic team and a fantastic community, so we appreciate everything that you all do to help us move forward. Before the Data Quality Awards, one of the traditional updates we do at this opening session is governance updates. So I got a few quick updates on the governance structure. Advisory Board. Thanks to Anthony, we have 3 new members on the Advisory Board that joined us for our most recent meeting in May. And those are Mike Means in Washington, Darren Polhemus in California, and Dan Simonik in Minnesota. The pilot UAT group, this is really the best group I've ever worked with. I'm not just saying that because they're here. This is a fantastic group. I can't say enough good things about the group. They are really highly competent and highly collaborative, great group to work with.